Okay, that's what I was trying to get confirmation. So this is about some SD70Ms that I'm in the process of rebuilding the Athearn Genesis, ready to run. So it was where they started life, and we're just going to kind of go through that and any questions or comments along the way. But we had some pauses, but let me see if I can figure out how to page down on this thing. Okay, we're on the correct screen. Give me a moment to get back caught up with the technology. And here we go. So what, when, and why? It's a fleet of SD70Ms is in the St. John's and Atlantic roster, one with the sound decoder, at least it was. There's 5 of them. The project's in progress. The one locomotive had a Soundtrax decoder that worked just fine. Had a very large speaker in the cab. There'll be a picture later on where you can see that. And it took up the entire cab. It was very clearly visible through the windows. And so the detailed cab was lost. The interior was lost. And I personally just didn't like the looks of it, although it sounded great. The other 4 locomotives had neither sound nor decoders. There was a duplicate road number, and one of them was an EMD demonstrator. So I was looking for a better solution at the end of the day. So here's what I wanted to kind of set up. I'm very goal oriented, so I took a look. So what did I want to have at the end of the day? I wanted a detailed cab interior with figures. I mean, detailed enough when you glance through the window, you would see something. Tributes, I name all the little tiny people after family and friends and that sort of thing, so I'm staying with it. Make sure that the numbers were prototypical, that the CSX actually had these on their roster. These all had green of wheat bulbs that are being replaced with LEDs. And I wanted to add additional detail: cab, ground, step, and number board lights, coupler lift bars, sound for everybody, LokSound 5 decoders. I've committed to LokSound. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And 5 is just their latest edition of it. Weather is appropriate for the locomotive age. These would have been on the roster for quite some time, starting to show their age. So they're going to be weathered up pretty good. Magmatic air hoses and MU hoses and KD couplers. And standard NMRA wire colors. Right now they're in Ford colors. All wires are black. So hope you like black. So I need to convert that. Even though the lead wire may be black, I need to convert it to whatever the standard is for that given thing. And along the way, have fun, learn, and be a better modeler at the end of the day. The journey never ends. So here's some glamour shots. These I took, quite frankly, are screen scrapes from the sales material. But we do have the demonstrator, the Spirit of Mulberry here on the bottom left, the Spirit of Miami, and the Spirit of Tampa is the 4 of them. Spirit of Miami was duplicated. I forget, I think these were gifts, and quite frankly, I kind of lost, can't remember all the details. But over here on the left-hand side of the screen, this is from the Spirit of Mulberry. This is the cab that comes from Athearn. So you have the 3 seats in there and these, going out to the nose, and the desk for the operators and stuff. But this is what it looks like with the big Soundtrax with the speaker in there. You lost all that. You have this big round speaker, and I didn't particularly like that. So that was the goal, to change that out. Here was an early attempt. I said, well, I just took 2 tiny figures and just cut the upper torso at the shoulder, glued them on the speaker. It looked like crap, and of course they didn't hold particularly well with the vibration, but it was a feeble attempt. You can also see the ditch lights up there. These are the original grain of wheats that came with it. So crews and tributes. So right now here in 4675 we have Fred, Russ, and Mike. And 4685 Bob, Joe, and Frank. Spirit of Tampa. This is my neighbors here, the Vallejos family. They've been gone the last 2 weeks on vacation, but it's mom, dad, and 4 kids, and they get to argue about who sits in what seats. But again, they've been gone, so I haven't to figure this off yet. And lastly, 4697, Larry, John, and Ron. So John actually designed the railroad, so that's kind of one reason I want to keep a tribute to him. It's a fun thing to do. I name the people in the buildings and anywhere else. There's something whimsical to do. So here's the roster before and after. The demonstrator, well, it still is a demonstrator, but it got a CSX patch on it and became 4697. 4699 became 75. and was patched over. And then, of course, the last 3 remained with their road numbers. This is an example of the renumbering process. You have 4699 Spirit of Miami became 4675. It's still taped at this point in time, but I painted over the Spirit of Miami at this point, put the new number on, and in the middle is the demonstrator. I just put the CSX blue in there and renumbered it, put a little American flag up there because that's what I saw in all the other locomotives, and wanted to make sure that was on there as well. There we are there. And here's all 5 of the cabs that are removed and taped over. This is just some quarter-inch, I think it's quarter-inch yellow tape I had laying around. I got it from Office Supply. It was actually multicolor. Well, what I was doing there in this process was simply taping over all the windows because I was going to hit up with Dullcote and weather them after I get the grab irons and stuff put on. And the headlights are removed at this point. But you notice that the number boards are on there. And I went to remove those decals and discovered that those are not decals. They simply took the black plastic, stamped it with a white rounded rectangle, and then stamped the road numbers on there. So I said, well, that's kind of the pits. So I can't have lighted number boards unless I do something about it, which I did. But we'll come back to that in a little bit here. So this is where I began the teardown. You can just see this is just a simple light board sitting here on the MD. One thing that threw me was I got to this point and I figured out how in the world do I remove the powertrain here. I just, and I was lost because where the 2 red arrows are pointing, those rectangles, I tapped that with a screwdriver and it sounded like a metal cover and I didn't want to bend it. It didn't, and tear it up permanently. So I wrote to Athearn and their customer service was fantastic. Said, that's really plastic, just pop them off. So I responded, are you sure? They said, yes, we're sure, we manufactured it. So I popped it off, it came off. Once you do that, the gear tower falls out and everything it just basically completely disassembles at that point. And here we are, here's the trucks, I've weathered them up. I have some of these little containers I've picked up somewhere or another. So they're weathered, they're with the standard black wire, and I showed what locomotive they were with at that point. I think in one of our previous sessions, someone said something airbrush. I do use the airbrush quite a bit. In this case, I simply went to Lowe's and got some camouflage, color camouflage brown, a rattle can, and it worked just fine. So here we are tearing it down again. There's another side shot of the of that cover that I was talking about earlier. Nothing really special. But until that got off, I couldn't really mess with all the wires correctly. This was the one with the soundtracks unit, so it actually did have some colored wires in it. But here we are now with the frame and just the flywheels. And you can see on the left-hand side, I put a little piece of tape on there so I can remember which locomotive was which. And it says, it has a road number and it says rear. Fortunately, Athearn actually etches into the metal on the other end front so you don't lose track. But this is about the time I took a look at an aha moment. So I said, where in the world am I going to put these? You know, back here you say, where am I going to put these speakers? So there you have the flywheels, the motor and the 2 flywheels. And I started taking a look and I said, you know what? I bet you a little sugar cube speaker would fit in there. And I bought 2 or 3 of them from Scale and had one sitting in a box somewhere. So I took that thing, put it in there, and I said, you know, that will just fit. It's too high though. I'm going to have all 5 of these things milled out. There was I think Aztec out in Colorado was doing it. They didn't respond to emails, and I haven't gone forward to find anything there. But my thought is to mill it out X and Y and then in depth. I want to mill the top layer just thick enough, just deep enough to hold the cube itself, and then the next layer in a slightly smaller rectangle so the sound can come out. And that way we'll sit in that little hole with a little bit of Walther's goo. And that's the game plan anyway. The speakers will sit actually underneath the flywheels. And the stop sign up there is to remind me to shut up and ask at this point if any questions or comments or thoughts at this stage before I plow forward.
I think Aztec is out of business.
Well, that will explain their lack of response.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark.
Because they did some milling on end scale frames for where you could just slide it a coater in, and I'm thinking they just went out of business. There you go.
Yeah. There's a lot of that going around, unfortunately.
Do
I
we know
appreciate that.
Do we know of anyone in town who could do milling for Mark?
Ooh.
Evidently not.
Okay. Well, no problem. I got some ideas, but for right now, that's so that's where we're at on that one right now. That's where at this stage. So we moving on. So you can see here, this is just another view of it. I pulled everything out. I said, okay, you can see where the flywheels are in purple there, and then the motor location. So the flywheels would be just above it, and that solution will work once I figure out how to mill the hole in there. Holes repeated. So here circling back to the number boards. I really did want to have the number boards lit up. So I sat there and drilled, as you can see here on the left-hand side, I drilled 3 little holes on it inside the white rectangle, if you will. And then I took an X-Acto blade and simply chiseled away till I had that hole, if you will. Interestingly enough, on the inside of the cab, they have a clear acrylic frame to hold the light. So I don't know what they were thinking, but there was they actually have as part of the glazing set. The glazing set covers all the windows, the roof of the cab, everything else, and also has a place for lights. I don't know why they did that, but they do. So what I did, I made a little sandwich here. I got some nano warm white LEDs I had laying around. They have this thin magnet wire here coming off of it. And I simply secured it. I took a little piece of clear styrene and secured it to the back, the front of the LED to the styrene with CA. And I didn't really care that it fogged it because I didn't need a direct light anyway. I just simply wanted to. So if you're seeing this, if you think of it as a sandwich, what's closest to us is that clear styrene. Right behind the clear styrene is a little dab of CA, and right behind that is the LED, and the wires are actually behind this thing. And I use a short little tail here, and then I'll use the standard leads coming off of this, the correct colors, my wife. And then when you come into the inside picture of it, you can see here, there's that little piece of clear acrylic that Atherton put in there. So I have where I'm kind of going back and forth on the right-hand side. There's the clear styrene. There's the LED. I took a little pinch of cotton simply to mechanically push it up against that that hole where the light board would be. And then once it was kind of held in place, I put some Uhu putty. I even have more on it out, so it's all black. But that cotton was just temporarily to kind of mechanically push it up there. I had some cotton handy, so that's what I did. So there we are, and how we solved, or in the process of solving that right now, in fact. So there, at this point, what you see is basically I've taken it and I turned it up on end and just dribbled a little bit of Canopy glue on there, allowed it to dry, repeat till it came to a reasonably flat surface. Then printed custom, the road numbers on white decal paper, and just waiting to be installed at this point. In fact, that's what I was doing just before our call here. LokSound. Why did I go to LokSound? Is this personal choice at the end of the day? This gives a little bit of what it looks like. You have a throttle. You have a command station, a wireless command station. There's your latest decoder. They all look kind of sort of the same. They just have more features than the latest one. I said, why? Well, I did a lot of research into it. Again, it really comes down to a personal decision. I'm not saying it's any better or worse than any other system. It's just the one I chose. I liked its simplicity. It uses the Android software for telephones. In fact, the throttle basically is a cell phone in so many words. Updates are simple and seamless. Basically, when you log in, it says, hello, I have an update, just like your phone does. And you say, let's go ahead and update. It updates, and instantly you're there. You can customize it by the user. let me go back to that previous screen. There's only 3 little buttons on this. You have the dial there for speed. There's 2 buttons on that side, one on the other. The rest of them are soft buttons in here. So you can program those for the locomotive, do accessory. You could do signals, turnouts, whatever you want to do. It's a Wi-Fi system, so that base unit works off of Wi-Fi. It's simple and intuitive in my mind. I know we take a decoder. When I do the decoders for the SD70, once I do the first one, and I can set the lighting levels for the cab light, and the ditch lights, so forth and so on. I get the intensities just right and get all the sounds in there. Sounds going to be simple because they're all the same locomotive. And I transfer that to the decoder. I simply put the next decoder in, change the road number on it. Everything else is going to be the same. I mean, the intensity of a ditch light, there's no reason for it to change. It will just by default be just right since all the components are identical. I've interacted with their customer service a little bit, and they have just been top notch. Any comments, questions at this point in the festivities?
I got one, Mark. A
Yes, sir.
question on LokSound controller system.
Yes.
Can you bring a non-LokSound controller into that? Or can you use, and if yes or no, but can you bring another Wi-Fi device, such as an iPad or an iPhone or an Android or something else?
Yes to the second question. I'm not sure to the first.
Okay.
In other words, so if you've had for example, if you had a Digitrax controller, I don't know how you would bring it in, quite frankly. Now you can use a Digitrax decoder, but I don't know if you could use a throttle.
So I could bring my iPhone and download an app and use it with the LokSound?
That's good.
Okay.
That's good because it has its own Wi-Fi address. So that address is different from the home address because it's its own Wi-Fi point, if you will.
Yep.
Probably not using all the correct terminology there.
Okay.
But I was very impressed with how much you can customize it, and it's got interfaces to computers. It does a lot that I've yet to discover other than superficially look out there and say, wow, you can do all sorts of stuff. They put a lot of emphasis on interfaces to European systems that most of us probably don't encounter on a regular basis. So I'm like, well, that's mildly interesting, but no impact on me whatsoever. So,
I'm pretty sure the system is compatible with JMRI, and so
yes.
you could hook up your phone or pad through JMRI.
All righty, so let's see here. I think we're coming to the end here. So Lagniappe, just a little fun little word from Southeast Texas, Louisiana area, meaning a little something extra, like when Barbara used to give me some stale gum when I was a kid. Staying organized. All these little parts around here, I got some 2-inch by 4-inch envelopes that I can write on. And these are just sanding lines. The sanding lines that came from Athearn, they're fragile and they kept breaking off. So I took some phosphor bronze wire and made 2 or 3 dozen of them, pre-painting, and just put them in a bag, figuring if they broke off during assembly, I'm sure they'll break off going forward. So I put everything in little bags, just a little something, whatever the heck. I use these cookie sheets. I get them from the dollar store, so the price is right. And so I put projects down here. I kind of over on the right-hand side, I have that little piece of tape there with whatever, either the name of the structure or the locomotive or whatever it happens to be. And these handles could be used to put it into a work-in-progress cabinet. I started looking at a banquet cabinet like you see at a banquet hall. You know, they come out of the food and they pull little trays out. I just thought that was clever. And I said, well, we'll see. I put some cork on the bottom to kind of protect things. Got a big thing of cork, cut it down. Right here, then I took a look. You can see one of right here. You have there's the interior of the cab. Not a whole lot of detail. I just simply painted the floor a metallic color. I haven't put the people in. There's somebody there. That'd be one of the engineers. It's female. But once it's in there, you probably won't notice that she's holding a purse and probably used to be sitting on a park bench or what have you. That'd be for our neighbors to argue which one of them is going to be where. There's two women in the family. So there we are. So how do we do on this thing? Well, again, it is a work in progress. The cab, yes, we are going to be able to have detailed cab interiors with figures because we're going to put the speaker somewhere else. Tributes, we have tributes lined up for this batch. The numbers are prototypical. I have checked on to make sure that was the case. I was actually going to use a different number. Then I looked at my decal set and said, hey, wait a minute, 75 is already here, so it's one less thing to cut out. So we went to that number. The grain and wheat bulbs with LEDs, they're no longer on order. They arrived the other day. Athearn has replacement LEDs for their ditch lights, and another resource has them for the headlights. So they are, half of them are in now. All these other lights here, ground, step, and so forth, a couple lift bars, that's awaiting assembly or in progress. The sound, again, we talked about milling earlier. We will weather when the time comes. That'd be towards the very end, obviously. And I have the hoses all ready, just start putting them in here. We've got the wire and having fun and learning, and like I said, being better. And I think that's, for me, is a goal, is not to, it's not to, once you get to a certain point, say, well, I've achieved it. No, I'm better than I was yesterday, and hopefully I'll be a little bit better a week from now if I keep working at it. So that's really were my goals, and there we are. And that wraps it up. And other than any questions or comments? Well, thank you for your time. Hope you had some fun.
Hey, Mark.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're Mark Norman.
Yes, sir. Bob.
Your milling problem, you might want to contact former Division 8 member Miles Hale. When he lived here, he had a miniature milling machine.
Okay, I will.
Yeah, so, I don't know what he's set up now, if he's fully retired or what, but you might want to contact him. I'm sure somebody in the division has his contact information. I do not.
I think Eric does. He's a good friend,
Yes,
or worshiper.
Yeah.
Eric does. You can also reach him on Facebook.
Okay,
so anyway,
thanks a lot. I do appreciate that.
Yeah, maybe a resource for you.
Beautiful. Thank you. Well, gentlemen, thank you. I mean, we did a driver those few days, and I truly do learn from everybody. So if I didn't mention your name yet, that's because I learn from everybody, truthfully. I swipe ideas from every one of you, like, wow, that's a good idea. And I'm constantly walking around 3x5 cars and writing things down like Miles Hale. Good idea. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, well, I'll pass it back to the whoever is now in control, and I'll be quiet and enjoy the next session.
Yeah, go ahead and stop sharing your screen if you would.
We'll do.
Mark?
Stop sharing.
There we go. We sent you all a reminder that the July contest is going to be, deadline is coming up a week from today on the 18th. So we sent out a reminder in Groups.io, and we'll also be making a post about additional details on that. If you're interested in being a part of the contest and you need some more detail on how to participate, it will come. We'll be, as I say, posting in the next 24 hours some instructions on exactly what you need to do. It's fairly simple. All you need to do is go online and fill out the PDF form that's on file, fill out on computer, save the PDF and email it to the Division 8 Gmail, along with 1 to 3 pictures. And then the media committee will take it from there. And then we've also contacted, Fred, would you highlight me for a second there? I can't seem to do that for some reason.
Done.
We also made an announcement about this here. Some of you might have seen it yet, and if you haven't, you'll also be receiving an announcement on this in the next 24 hours. This is the new Division 8 hand sanitizer.
Cool.
We have a little function coming up next Sunday, the 19th, at the 600 building, where you can get your own bottle or several of the Division 8 hand sanitizer. We thought it might be something good that everybody could use. We'll give one free to every member, and then you can purchase additional bottles if you need it. Looks like that. Nice stuff. 2-year shelf life. We'll be posting a message on that in Groups.io as well. So now we're going to move right over to Kevin Jones.
All righty. Let me get this going
And
here.
let me get you on the screen here, and then you can go ahead and share your screen when you're ready. Kevin's going to be talking about a Caboose project he's working on.
Ta-da. All right. So everybody seen the PowerPoint?
Yep.
Okay, good. All right. So this was kind of a true COVID project. Started this guy when basically I started working from home, and it took me a couple of months to build this little guy. How I got started on him is that there's some prototypes out there for this. You know, the real Caboose. I've seen a couple of pictures of a couple of different ones from the logging company. This one's from the Deep River Logging Company in Washington. And then everybody's probably seen this in the Katie catalog. Katie makes their own Caboose to fit on top of a disconnect logging truck. Well, I've been building these homemade On30 disconnect trucks, built 8 of them so far now. And I decided, well, I can build my own Caboose to go on the top of these. So that's where this inspiration started. So I designed the major components of the Caboose in SketchUp Make. It's the last free desktop version of SketchUp, so I'm running a couple years behind. If you want a free version now, the current version, they only offer it as a web-based application now. I already had the disconnect truck, so all I had to do is make some modifications to it to basically fill out some of these pieces that weren't there for the as a logging disconnect, for it to be a Caboose instead. And then when I was done with this at the end of the day, basically I had 3 components. This is to actually 3D print this Caboose. So there is a roof trim piece. There's the main body, and then the disconnect here at the bottom. The steps actually came along later. You'll see in the process. I didn't actually design the steps when I designed the main Caboose. I kind of forgot those and had to do them later. One interesting thing was how to hold all this together. This sets on top of a Bachmann ON30 logging car truck, and that's made of Delrin. And of course, you know, that Delrin plastic doesn't really glue to anything without falling off. So I had to come up with a way to hold this whole thing together. So I designed this piece in the middle, and there's a through hole in the back, and a 256 screw goes all the way up through this to hold the entire unit together. It also makes it so I can disassemble it if I have to do any maintenance or add weight to it later. Got these 2 slides backwards, hang on. So here's your printed sub assemblies here. So you can see you have the, there's the disconnect truck on the bottom, there's the main body, and there is the trim piece for the roof on top. All this was printed on an ordinary, what they call an FDM printer. This printer basically heats up plastic filament and then squirts out on layers on a table and builds things up in layers. So part of the design of this Caboose, and I'll back up a little bit, is that you'll see that it's horizontally sheathed, and because the body's printed in one piece, basically from the top up to the bottom, that kind of allows me to hide any layer lines as wood grain when we get to finishing it later. So there is all the finished parts test fit on the truck, so it all fit together pretty good. The beauty with 3D printing is if it doesn't work out the first time, you throw it in the trash and you make some design changes and try it again. So this is actually the second iteration of the body. Now, in order to make this thing look like wood, you kind of have to do some work to it. So basically, all these plastic pieces are tacked with an Atlas razor saw. So basically I'm scraping it, and not gently either. It's basically you just take it and gouge it to death until you have a nice rough wood grain in it. Next step is the printer doesn't really have the resolution to print the door well, these FDM printers. They're not very good at printing small details. So the door is just actually a Grant Line Caboose door that's been glued in place. So I just made a blank there as part of the 3D print, then went back and cut it out and glued the door in place. Now, next pieces were some trim. The one thing that FDM printers don't do well is square corners because of, you're squirting plastic out of a round hole. When you go around an outside corner, it's always going to be rounded to some degree. You can see this down here on the disconnect truck. So the corners have a piece of evergreen a plastic angle, and that gives me a nice square corner to the goose, plus makes a nice trim piece, and then a couple of trim pieces around each door to cover up that gap where the board's in next to the door. At this point, I just mocked up the roof with a piece of cardboard to kind of size out the pieces of plastic I'll need later. Next step is grab irons. So these guys are 0.015 phosphorus bronze wire from Tichy. We'll talk about these little nut bolt washer castings here in a minute. Both ends of the caboose basically look the same. For people that are noticing closely, this is not the same roof piece I started out with. It had to be redesigned. The first one I built was too flimsy and I could not ever get the glue on straight. So I had to basically redesign it and build another. So the grab irons, there's two tools I use for those. One is this called the grab handler from Mission Models. I believe that this is no longer, this particular tool is no longer available, but Micromark made a clone of it. And basically what you do is you put your piece of wire across here, whatever size you want it, squeeze this down and then bend it down at a 90-degree angle on both sides. It's very good for making, if you need to make an odd size grab iron and make the same one, several of them over and over again. And then in O scale, we can get these McLeod Western grab iron ends from Foothill Model Works, and these actually represent the nut bolt washer casting and the little oval piece at the end that usually goes through at the end of a grab iron. Now, even in O scale, these things are teeny weeny tiny, and you have to put them on with tweezers and magnifiers, and it's a real pain in the butt. So I only use them on, when I'm using just very limited models or something I'm really detailing. And at the end of the day, after you get it painted everything, I'm really not sure it makes all that much difference than just using a plain old nut bolt washer casting next to it. All right, so after the grab irons, I decide we're going to need some steps. And one thing that FDM printers are not good at, like I said, is doing square corners. And you can see that here, where this end is just it's not inconsistent, it's rounded off at the end. So what I have to do when I want something really small and square is I have to print extra material and then cut it off. So what we'll wind up doing is cutting off these ends here at the end to make them square. And then we've made extra length here to that'll be cut off later so we can square those ends up as well. So here we have the steps mounted. You can see where I've trimmed off these edges to make them square, trimmed off the top here to make them square with the disconnect truck. And these here are just some Tichy rivet ends that I just eyeballed, placing them and drilling them in later. And then finally, we have our subroof and smokestack. You can see I've started to color the disconnect truck a little bit here. This is a Grant Line part. So basically, in this piece here, anything that's gray, except for the door and the smokestack, is 3D printed. The white pieces are all evergreen styrene. Okay, coloring the caboose. So the disconnect trucks, I color basically using a khaki spray base layer. I've been using Krylon camouflage colors in the past. I've started using this Vallejo khaki spray paint. You can get at scale. This Vallejo paint, while it's a lot more expensive than the Krylon, spray can comes with a different nozzle in it, which is a fine spray nozzle. So I actually think the spray will go longer using it on models, because it just doesn't put out as much paint when you use it with that fine sprayer. Then what I use is a Vallejo gray dark and dark gray acrylic washes that gives you depth in the wood grain. And then finally I dry brush it with a folk art barnwood acrylic, and that gives you your weathered gray wood look on top of that. All my metal is done with basically with a 3-layer process. First of all, there's a base layer. If I'm hand painting, I'll use the Vallejo Panzer Aces Dark Rust. This is just kind of a dark brown base. If I'm doing like a truck or something, I'm gonna spray paint it, then I'll use one of the either Krylon or Rust-Oleum Camouflage dark brown colors. And the next thing I do is dry brush it with with Vallejo Rust, and then let that dry, and then I'll dry brush it again with a light rust. So we've basically got 3 layers of rust color on all the metal parts. Now the body, this is the first time I've ever attempted this, is we're going to attempt to use chipping medium. And this basically, the process is supposed to work. I'm going to try to do representation of peeling paint, and I'm going to paint it with a light sand color. Then we're going to put the chipping medium, the red color on top of that. And then what we do is you're supposed to be able to take a brush and basically wet it, and it allows you to chip off that red color and reveal some of the sand color, and then go through and do a gray wash on top of that to kind of weather down that sand. Now, that's the ideal situation, and finding as I used it, it didn't quite go as planned. So here's our first color. That's the light sand color for that's going to represent our wood underneath. If you're careful to observe, you'll notice that a handle on the door has suddenly appeared. I couldn't find an O-scale door knob that worked for me, so I wound up just bending that out of a piece of phosphorus bronze wire. You can see here that I've already colored the disconnect truck with that 3-color process, and you see all the metal components here have also been colored with that 3-step process, along with the trucks and the KD coupler itself. So next we put our chipping medium and the Ferrari red. And you can see here, if you look closely, that something's kind of gone wrong already, is that it looks like the chipping medium started to activate already. So we've got some crazing and some pieces where it didn't cover well, which is really not how this is supposed to work. You can see, yeah, you can see where it's crazed here on a lot of the parts and things that it shouldn't have activated yet, but yet it did. So now chipping. So, you know, ideally you watch these things on the YouTube video and you take a brush and, you know, you wet it and you go at it a little bit, and the paint will start chipping off. Well, what I found was my smoother parts, like the door here and these trim pieces, it chipped off very easily, probably a little too easy than I was expecting. All my parts I had wood grain, like the sides, I wound up having to use a flux brush with the end, you know, trimmed down real stiff, and I still couldn't get the kit chip very much. So this is the best I could do with the resources I had. So after several applications of a gray wash, we finally get to where we're looking at, looks like a weathered wood underneath, and then, you know, just kind of dirtied the caboose up pretty heavily. All right, so lessons learned from the chipping medium. This is the first time I've used it, and I probably should have experimented more on other models, or at least some test parts before I tried it the first time. Watching some other YouTube videos, I probably put the chipping medium on too heavy. It needs to be applied very, very lightly, like you probably shouldn't even see it there when you put it in. And it works better over a gloss or semi-gloss surface. So what happened was, on my wood parts that I had grained, well, not only did the chipping medium just held on too tight, so it was very hard to chip it off. So the advice I found was that you really should put the chipping medium over a gloss or a semi-gloss surface. I found that the tan color I'd used was a little too light, so I wound up having to use a lot more gray washes than I had planned. And one problem I had was that I wound up with the handrails showing wood, basically, when I chipped it off. I wish I'd gone back, you know, 20/20 hindsight, and painted them a rust color before putting the chipping medium on. That would have been more realistic. Not a big deal. I just had to go back and paint those areas with a rust colored paint after I'd done that. So the roof, the final roof is a couple pieces of corrugated aluminum. I remember, I think this is made by, let me see if I can find the company here. Stony Creek, yeah, Stony Creek models from them. It really is an aluminum product that's been run through some sort of corrugating machine. This strip at the top is actually a piece of cardstock that's been creased down the middle. And then it's all been weathered with pastels, and then a couple of washes to kind of bring out the depth in the corrugated aluminum. Then here's the final Caboose walk around. You can see the smoke jack's in place now. I've done a little weathering on it. One detail that came later that I hadn't anticipated was brakes. My Caboose had no brakes when it originally was built, so I had to add some things to that. So here you'll see that I've added a titchy brake wheel and ratchet here, so at least when the crew parks this thing, they can stop it from rolling it away. And if you look in here, there's some tiny brake shoes, and those are another 3D printed part I made. This Bachmann truck off the shelf does not come with any brake shoes on it. And there it is, the final product. All right, so we can take some questions if anybody's got any.
Kevin, that's incredible, buddy. It really is. Start to finish like that from the ground up. Nicely done.
Okay, well, thank you. Like I said, the miracle of 3D printing, there's a box over here with a lot of stuff that didn't make it through the first time. So, so if first you don't succeed, you print another.
Well, and that gives you something to experiment your paint trials on.
That's true. That's true.
Good.
Very nice, Kevin.
All right.
Yes, indeed.
Any other questions before we let Kevin go?
Yeah, this is Joe Fields, Kevin.
Yeah.
Where did you purchase the Valero? Is that how you pronounce that?
Vallejo. Yeah, it's Scale Reproductions has it. It's over there on top of one of the. It's on the opposite side of the aisle that the Vallejo paints is. They're setting on top. I think it's the Mission Models rack now. We just got Mission Models paint. It's literally across from the cash register. You'll see them all stacked up on top of one of the racks, the rack closest to the cash register in that paint aisle.
Okay, thank you.
Ooh, that's an extreme close-up of a book.
I don't know. I'm going to put a quick comment out there that if you're not watching chat, I did post a link to 2 different versions of the grab iron bending tool. One from Micromark and another one from RP Tools. They are different, but they do essentially the same thing. So,
Thank you, Fred. All right. If there's no other questions, then we're going to get ready to move over to our final presenter, Rick, who's going to talk to us about his most recent load project.
Afternoon, gentlemen. My open load, I ran across at a train.
Hey, Rick, hang on a second, because I forgot to remute everybody. So let me do that and then unmute you. Okay, we can hear you.
All right. Afternoon, everybody. My open load, I ran across this at a train show a couple years ago and caught my eye how this gentleman had done his. It has to do, really kind of comes to my heart because my layout is basically automotive themed to it. I have a huge General Motors assembly plant in there. So I thought, hey, what's an assembly plant without having car frames coming in there? So here is the picture of the frame, the open load I did here this year. It started out as the flatbed is a Walther's mainline 60-foot Putman standard with the trailer train brand on it. The load is a auto frame load, which is a JJM Railroad Express. which is right here. They come 80 frames to a kit. The 60 footer, you use just about a whole box. If anybody does an 85 footer, they're going to need 2 boxes of it. If you do happen to run across and do it, I suggest you get a very nice tweezers, because these are extremely delicate, and if you use an X-Acto knife on them, you're going to break them. Take it from experience. That was the first thing I used, and I broke 2 of them. So it comes with a nice set of instructions here that you can read and follow and do it as if you want, or however you do want to do it yourself. The one nice thing about it I like was right here, it has a template that you can use to make the upper hold down frame, which I did. I basically made a copy of it, cut it out, laid it down on a table, and then put a piece of glass over it. And then you can just take your whatever you want to use. I used the Evergreen brand styrenes, and you can cut them out to that exact template and glue them right up right there, and then move on and do your next ones. The bottom part of it, where the frame set is was used an I-beam, the Evergreen I-beam 273, which you can get, like I said, at scales. The top parts were all made with the 285 H column styrene and never scale. I glued them up and then just painted them with a yellow caution, or I've seen some of them in, if you run a CSX, you can use the blue. There's CSX blue on them. I think Union Pacific uses the yellow, which that's basically what my layout is. The hold downs, I used the chains called the A-line, which are 40 length, the blackened ones. And that way you don't have to do anything. There's some brass out there if you want to do brass, but I had some of them and painted them, and they don't turn out real good when they're painted. And then on the ends of them, I ran across this in one of the online magazines last year, and I bought a pack of them. I wish I would have bought more, because after putting this together, I've got another set I want to do, and I got online trying to find them, and they're no longer available. So I don't know what I'm going to do, but they're a ratchet style load bender, which are made by Precision Design Company. They're out of, I think they're out of Canada. Their website is right there. I don't know if you can see it. They come on a cutout like this, which you can, I just took regular red flat paint, painted them, let them dry, painted both sides. You see I got a few of them still left here at the end. The rest of them have been used on that the model I did. And I took the chains and cut them into 3-inch pieces. I took one end and glued on one end of the adjustable ratchet, and then took the other end and looped it around and glued it on that end and let them set up overnight, and then cut about 1/4 of an inch down from the end, or from one end of the ratchet. Like, I don't know if you can see that right down there is about 1/4 of an inch. There's your ratchet, and there's the rest of your chains. Glue each of these down, let them set, and then bring the other end up and on the top and glue it, kind of pull it tight and glue it there. And then after it dries, excuse me, you can let it take the end of it and cut the excess off of it. Once everything is glued up, I went in there and took some weathering mix, which I made myself, which is a 1/4-inch teaspoon to 1/2 a pint of rubbing alcohol, and just kind of brushed it on there, let it dry. Some guys have used I do have this aging solution made by Model Tech Studios. I've used it before. It's not too bad, but to me, it's a little dark. Once that is done, and then I went in there with some rusting solution made by the same company. Went in there and just kind of lightly brushed it on there, let it dry. And then once everything was dry, you go in there and take your Dullcote or whatever you use and just seal it up. Basically, then you can do your weathering on your truck and your axles and all that. And basically, that's the legit of it. That's pretty much what I did with her. And that is pretty much the end of mine. Mine's a little short, so if you got any questions, I'll answer them.
Very nice, Rick.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Rick.
Thank you.
Nice model with some nice detail. Once again, if you're paying attention to chat, we have a parts list for Rick's project, which we'll post on Groups.io later today. If you want to have a copy of that, it lists some of the sources and is just a further explanation of, you know, how you can kind of do the same thing if you're as good as Rick.
Thank you.
Rick, can you hold your model up again? I'd like to see how you have it mounted. You said you mounted it on an I-beam.
Yeah. I don't know if you can see.
Oh,
that.
got it. Yeah, I see
Yeah,
now.
right
Okay.
down there on the bottom, just two
Yeah.
I-beams per stack.
Oh, yeah.
Those were double stacked. I went 13 on each stack. I know some guys do 10. They can do up to 15, they recommend. But yeah, you can put them down there. The I-beams, painted them yellow and just set them right on there. And then the top, let's see if I can turn this a little bit. There's what the top looks like. It's just basically an H column with two ends on it. It's all the same H column for the top and then the I-beam for the bottom.
And I think I heard you say when you were talking about your parts list, you said something was no longer available, but I didn't catch what that was.
It's the ratchets, the load binders. These right there.
From
They're
Precision Design, right?
Yeah.
They're
still in business, but they didn't have any available, and I think it said was out of production.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, if anybody knows of anything like that, just send me a email or something. I got enough to do a couple more cars, so I want to get a couple more cars done. But
Actually,
yeah, they're very nice. I've used them on a couple of open load projects. I didn't realize they were not available anymore.
Yeah, unless I tried looking on the internet, I haven't found anybody that had maybe some stock of them or anything. But I'll keep searching.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks very much for Mark and Kevin and Rick for their presentations today. Much appreciated, and appreciate the sharing and the information. If you have any updates later, let us know.